What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of the Game Week 10 deadline. So I'm going to go through the latest team news information, give you a bit of an update on the blank double Game Week situation, benching headaches, answer some of your questions, and quickly look at my own team as well. So let's get into it. So let's start with some of the team news. For Arsenal, Martinelli is out for Game Week 10. If you've got him, which I assume most people don't, that's a pretty easy sell. He's one of the worst Arsenal picks you can have, I would say, for your FPL team, and he's not even going to play against Burnley. Therefore, I would sell him. Saliba's a doubt. Arteta said we'll have to wait and see, so he's not completely ruled out. I think if I had a spare transfer, I would just deal with that. I would just do Saliba to Gabriel or Saliba to Timber, get the better Arsenal defender in, and then leave it. And it's not that Saliba is a terrible pick or anything like that. He's going to play the majority of games. He does have some goal threat, but I think he probably is the worst Arsenal defender out of the four. And that's more to do with how good the other three are rather than how terrible Saliba is. But given that he's a doubt and it's Burnley away, if you've got the spare transfer, I would deal with it. If it's for a hit, I'd probably risk it. Odegaard, Madueke and Havertz are still out. Personally, I don't think we'll see them until after the international break. So if you've got any hesitations about Gyökeres's minutes, Saka's minutes, etc., they should be absolutely fine until after the break. Eze as well is still a pretty good hold. I wouldn't necessarily buy him, but he's okay to hold on to. For Liverpool, Isak is 99% going to be out this week. If you've got him, I think he's a pretty easy sell. It's City next week, and then I know the fixtures from 12 onwards are good, but this guy's over 10 million. You need more guarantee from a player than what he's offering. And it might not even be that he plays every single game when he's back fit anyway because of Ekitike. So for me, it's an easy sell. Gravenberch is back in training. The only reason I put that there is because a few weeks ago, people were buying him. So you might have him in your team. But more importantly, if you happen to have like Van Dijk or a Liverpool defensive player, maybe this will help them. I suspect probably not. But Gravenberch being back is better than him being out for sure. Mitoma's still a doubt for Brighton. If you've got him, I'd probably sell him. And then for Chelsea, there's nothing wrong with João Pedro, Enzo and Caicedo. They'll probably all start this weekend against Spurs. But Maresca said we cannot plan with them because of their problems, their situations. It's game by game to see how many minutes we can give them. Now, right now, in the Premier League, they're all pretty much playing pretty decent minutes. Like if you've got Enzo Fernandez, I would expect him to play close to 90 again. But there does seem to be an ongoing issue with all three of them. Maresca's mentioned it numerous times now. So maybe if you're on the fence about buying any of them, like Enzo, maybe this is enough to slightly put you off and make you go to someone else. Likewise, if you're not quite sure about keeping João Pedro, he's probably okay this week. He'll start. I'm almost certain of that. His minutes will probably be good. But maybe this is just another reason to get rid of him if you're on the fence. So all three are probably fine, but it makes me a little bit more cautious about buying them, especially Enzo, because obviously he's a pick that people have been looking at recently. So for Newcastle, Eddie Howe said that Visser is not close to first team training. So if you've got Voltemada or you're thinking about bringing him in, that's probably still a pretty good pick over the coming weeks. The minutes are looking pretty good. And if Gordon does go off of the pitch at any time, Voltemada looks to be second in line for penalties as well. I'm not quite sure when we're going to see Visser. Presumably he's not going to go away for African Cup of Nations because he's not fit. But if he does, that means Newcastle might not see him play until like after Christmas or something like that, which is kind of crazy. Anyway, moving on, Lewis Hall is back in training soon. When he gets fully fit, which again might be a little while, it'll be interesting to see what happens to Newcastle defence, because presumably Lewis Hall will play left back and then Dan Burn will move to centre back. So Botman will probably come out, but Burn, Botman and Chow is doing pretty well right now. So I'm not quite sure. If you really want a Newcastle defender, I'd probably still buy Dan Burn for 5.1. But Chow at 4.9 also looks fairly nailed right now. I'm hesitating a little bit because they've got so many options. Like Cher could come in at some point. Burn can go and play centre-back when Lewis Hall is back. I don't know. I think the Newcastle fixtures are okay if you already own a defender, but I'm not sure I'd be going out of my way to buy one. For Leeds, Goodmanson should be fine. So if you've got him and you need to play him over the coming weeks, that should be okay. For Bournemouth, Evan Nilsson has been training normally most of the week. I think Evan Nilsson could probably come back into the team this week. Not a guarantee because he's had an injury. They might just play Krupi Jr. again. But Man City away is a tough game. I think if Evan Nilsson is in any way close to being like fully fit, I think he'll go straight back in the team. And if he doesn't do it this week, if he's been training normally, it's very likely it will happen next week. So Krupi Jr., I personally just don't think is worth buying because he's 4.6 million, Gio is 4.2. Basically, my prediction over the coming weeks would be that neither of them get good minutes. So you might as well take the cheaper option unless you think you're going to need space for like Chalobah, Enzo, and João Pedro anytime soon. Or Caicedo, Enzo, and Reece James, whoever it might be. Personally, I cannot see me wanting to triple up on Chelsea anytime soon. But if you think you might, maybe go for Krupa Jr., but I'd rather say the 0.4 million. I think it will just come in useful later on. And for Sunderland, Alderete trained normally with the squad this morning. Therefore, presumably, he'll be back in the team this week. If you've got him, it's Everton at home. If you want to play him, I absolutely would. So for Fulham, we had some pretty interesting information. Marco Silva said that Joachim Andersen, Wilson, Smith Rowe, and Muniz are all in contention for game week 10. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean they will definitely start, but there is a chance. So if you've kept Anderson this long, bearing in mind he's still only 4.5 million, pretty good value, I think you just hold him now. Because even if he doesn't start this week, Everton away in 11, not terrible. Sunderland at home in 12, not bad. And then longer term, 15, 16, 17 and 18, I think he's playable in any of those fixtures if you need him. So I quite like the idea of holding on to him. Some people may want to now play him this week. There is obviously some risk there. To me, in contention pretty much means they're going to be in the squad. Could Anderson be on the bench and come on for a cameo? There is obviously potential that could happen. Personally, if I had to predict it, I think it's more likely that he starts, and I am very tempted to put him in my 11 and play a back four this week. But it's a bit different for me because it's Anderson versus Reinders or Anderson versus Paquetá, as I'll talk about later, and I'm not all that happy with the midfielders. If you're happy with your 11, I wouldn't necessarily force Anderson in because there is some risk there. On Wilson and Smith Rowe, I know no one really owns them, but obviously they could have an impact on Josh King's minutes. So King's got a good fixture this week. If you wanted to play him, I don't hate it. We'll talk about him later in benching headaches, but I still think his minutes are a little bit, I'm just wary of them. I don't think he's necessarily a great pick. I don't like 4.5 million. Obviously, you could have him as a dead spot who potentially plays sometimes, but I think there's better ways to fill your midfield, to be honest. And obviously, Muniz, no one really owns Raul Jimenez right now, but longer term, there is going to be competition for minutes. For Crystal Palace, Nketiah is just a minor issue. Should be back after the break, but it's still good news, obviously, for Mateta's minutes. And Richards, according to the Palace website, trained today without any issues. So presumably he'll be in the team, but it's worth saying he was missing out midweek because of injury. So there is a chance they don't risk it at the weekend. I suspect he will play because he always does. But there's more doubts than normal, I guess. Like only minor doubts, but they are there. If you've got the money to buy Gay or Lacroix, that's maybe a little bit safer, I would say. For West Ham, there's obviously rumours going around that Paquetá wants to leave in January. Nuno has come out and said he's going to play on Sunday. I know that doesn't affect most people watching this, but I guess it's some, bit of comfort if you do own him. If he's going to play this Sunday, as long as he's fit, he's going to play next week against Burnley at home as well. And then for Spurs, Romero, Udogie, Odegaard are back in contention as well. So Romero could be back in the team this week if you've held on to him. Solanke's out until after the break. Just a small addition on the Fulham stuff. There is a graphic that the Fulham Twitter account has posted with a quote from Marco Silva, which has it worded a little bit differently, which says Anderson is in, and then full stop. Wilson and Smith Rowe are in contention, full stop. Muniz and Chukwueze could be in contention. So that obviously puts major doubts around Muniz, but it makes it sound much better for Joachim Andersen. Now, I still think there is some risk there. I haven't seen the press conference myself, but it makes me way more tempted to start Anderson. I think if you've got someone you're really, really not sure about and you've got Anderson on your bench, you probably play him. But if it's close, maybe you go for the safer pick. But I do think Anderson against Wolves is a pretty good option if he's going to play. I think the sooner that Marco Silva can get him back in, the happier he'll probably be. So my bet is going to be an Anderson start, but please take on board there is some risk there. I know I've been a bit lazy with the graphic here, but I thought I better include this information. Pep Guardiola has confirmed that Erling Haaland is fit for Man City versus Bournemouth, which, to be honest, I don't think was ever a problem. But he didn't play midweek, right? He wasn't in the squad. So just in case you were worrying, Haaland is fine. Still a great captain this week. Pep did also say that Rodri could return to the squad this week, but he pretty much said it's very unlikely to be in the starting 11. So it might just be a sub appearance. If he comes back and can play regularly, that might help Reinders. But to be honest, by the time that happens, Reinders is probably not going to be a pick for us. So probably fine this week, Reinders, or at least okay if you have to play him. But longer term, I'm still not completely convinced by him. So just a quick update on the blank game week stuff that I spoke about in a video yesterday. It is starting to look less and less likely that it's going to happen. It's not completely off the table, but basically there's an article on the BBC talking about the date for the Carabao Cup game. And Alex Howe, who's a football reporter for the BBC, said the search for a date for Arsenal versus Palace in the Carabao Cup continues. The 16th, 23rd and 24th of December are the options being discussed. Arsenal's preference is to play on the 16th. If they pick any of those dates, there won't be a blank game week. And without a blank game week, you can't have a double. So basically, if the Carabao Cup game goes on one of those dates mentioned, we'll go back to having no blanks, no doubles in the first half of the season, unless a Premier League game gets called off for different reasons like the weather or something like that. Basically, the reason is the match in Game Week 17 where we were speculating that could be the potential blank. Leeds versus Palace was on the 21st of December. So unless the Carabao Cup game goes on Saturday or Sunday, there'll be no need to have this match rearranged. Basically, if it gets put on the 23rd, the Carabao Cup game, Palace will have to play against Leeds away on Sunday and then 2 days later play Arsenal, which obviously won't be ideal. There have to be rotation in one of those games, but that is the spot they're probably going to get put in. And if it's on the 16th of December, Palace will basically play on the weekend in Game Week 16. I think they've then got Carabao Cup. December 16th will be the Tuesday, Carabao Cup. And then I think they've got a Europa Conference League on the Thursday. So they might have to play Palace Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then Sunday again. So it doesn't look like the Premier League are going to bow down and rearrange a game just so this Carabao Cup game has a little bit more space. So therefore, no blanks, probably no doubles either. We should, as I said in yesterday's video, get more information ahead of Game Week 11. I don't think they will drag this out in terms of where the date is going to go. So if you can put off any decisions until next week, do that. But don't hold back. Don't not make a really massive upgrade this week just in case there's a blank in 17 or just in case there's a double in 16, because it's starting to look really unlikely that that's going to happen. And therefore, you can go back to playing the chips wherever you were going to play them. And by the way, on free hit, if we don't get to play it in the blank in Game Week 17, it's really just open as to when you want to play it. 12, 13, 14, 15, even maybe 16 all kind of work. But I'll talk about that a bit more once we know for sure where this Carabao Cup game is going to go. So let's go through some of your benching headaches this week. These are the players that were sent to me on Twitter. Somebody mentioned Minteh at Brighton. I mean, he's got Leeds at home. He should probably be right at the top of this list, which is why I've put him there. Then I've got Semenyo in second place. There's way more questions than I was expecting about Semenyo this week, mostly because of how good he's done this season. I thought most people would just put him in their team and it would be as easy as that. I do appreciate it's Man City away, so it's not a great fixture, but in most cases I would probably play him over the other player you're thinking about. So I've put him second on this list. If you're looking at that thinking, I'm not so sure I'd bump him down, that's absolutely fine. The reason these are headaches is because the decision is close. So there's not necessarily a right or wrong, but I think Semenyo should be pretty high up. I think Bournemouth will cause Man City some problems. I don't think it'll be one of those games where City just have all the possession and just attacking constantly or anything like that. Then Thiago against Crystal Palace, mostly because he's on penalties and we know he's going to play. I will say, if you've got a Palace defender, which a lot of people will have, and you're really close between Thiago and someone else, you could use the Palace defender as reason to play the other guy. But I do think Thiago is not bad this week. Then Mukiele, quite high up, but Everton at home's a decent fixture for clean sheet potential. We know he's got goal threat, and he's pretty good for defensive contributions as well. So I would have him quite high up. I will say, though, I've then got João Pedro, then Reinders. Now, a question I know I would get on the deadline stream, if you actually had that decision, Mukiele versus João Pedro or Mukiele versus Reinders, would you actually play the defender? My answer would be I don't know. I don't know. I feel like when it came down to it, when we get to the deadline on Saturday, I'd probably play the attacker. But I do think Mukiele is one of the better defenders this week. Like, Sunderland defence has been decent. Everton attack is okay, but Sunderland are at home. Defcon's goal threat. I don't know. I think you could put Mukiele below João Pedro and Reinders if you wanted to. But I absolutely think that Mukiele is a good pick this week. João Pedro above Reinders, more from a minutes perspective than anything, to be honest, because Reinders has probably got the better game. I just think that his minutes are a little bit more susceptible to being lower this week than João Pedro, despite what Maresca has said. Again, these are all pretty close decisions. Then Richards against Brentford at home, then Paquetá against Newcastle at home, and then Xhaka against Everton at home. I did actually have Xhaka ahead of Paquetá when I first made this graphic, and then when I went to record, I switched them around purely because of penalties. That's about it. There's nothing wrong with Xhaka whatsoever. Good for DEFCONs, might take some set pieces, etc. Everton at home, probably a better fixture than Newcastle at home, but because of penalties, I've put Paquetá ahead of him. That's pretty much it. Then King from Fulham against Wolves at home. Some people would probably have him higher up, and I do suspect that he'll start this week because of the issues that Fulham have, etc. And Wolves at home is a really good fixture, but I still think his minutes are just not convincing enough for me. And obviously, we're not seeing a huge amount of attacking output from him. He's still quite young, etc. If he was going to play like 80 to 90, then maybe I'd put him a bit higher, but I'm still not quite sure about him. But I guess the Wolves at home fixture might swing it for you. But I would have him below Paquetá and Xhaka, I think. Then 3 other defenders. I've put Chalobah, then Rodon, then Senesi. Senesi is good for defensive contributions. He'll probably get them this week. But Man City away is a terrible fixture. Like, that is a game where Bournemouth could concede 2 or more in it. And I think Chalobah, Spurs attack, not really been all that impressive. I mean, Brighton is not amazing either. But I just think Chelsea defence better than Leeds defence. And Spurs away, I don't know. At this point, we're kind of clutching at straws at who's the better pick. They're all not great, right? Chalobah, Rodon, Senesi are probably all going to concede. But I just think Chalobah... I mean, it's difficult to sit here and say Chalobah's goal threat's better when Rodon's just smashing goals left, right and centre. As I'm talking this through, I'm not quite convinced by that. I just think Chalobah might be slightly better goal threat and slightly better defensive contributions. But Rodon's done okay for both this season. And Brighton away arguably better than Spurs away. I don't know. Again, that's really close. All I know is I would definitely play both of them ahead of Senesi. I'm going to stick to Chalobah above Rodon, but again, if you wanted to flip it around, you could. So let's get into some of your questions, and we'll start with a couple about Jean-Philippe Mateta. And look, I don't get many predictions right in FPL, but I got this one correct at the start of the week. I said there's going to be so much chat about Crystal Palace players this week that people will start to question what all the hype is about. They'll start to ask whether they're essential, etc. That's exactly what's starting to happen. Now we're getting closer to the deadline. So first question, I'm a bit worried about going without Mateta for at least the next 2 weeks. Is he absolutely essential, or can I get by for now? And then second question, is Mateta a huge knee-jerk? Only 2 goals in 8 games outside of the hat-trick. Another way to phrase that, by the way, is he scored 5 goals in 9 games, which is not bad. But yes, I get it, right? Outside of the hat-trick, not a huge amount of goals. He's a good player, but he's not going to score a hat-trick every week. I mean, yeah, that is true. He's not going to score a hat-trick every week, but he also doesn't need to score a hat-trick every week to be a good player. Look, sometimes in FPL, everything just comes together to make one player the one that everyone's looking at. So this week, I've sold Evan-Nielsen. Not a great option moving forward, I don't think. Like, Jean-Philippe Mateta, I think we can all agree is better than Evan-Nielsen. Okay, so that was an easy move. People have got João Pedro, who they've held on for a while, despite not really wanting to in a lot of cases. He's blanked again against Sunderland. They want to get rid of him. Oh, look, you got a player on penalties, averaging 87 minutes per start, pretty much nailed to start every game as well. Really good underlying numbers. Oh, and he's also got 3 home games in the next 4, and the 2 away games in the next 5 are Wolves and Burnley. So I've sold Evan-Nielsen. People are selling João Pedro. Some people are sick of Jarrod Bowen, etc. There's just a lot of forwards people don't want, and Jean-Philippe Mateta is right there. And yes, of course it helped that he scored a hat-trick back in Gameweek 8, and had he not scored that, there might be a fewer transfers in for him, but I bet he'd still be pretty damn popular. Because who else would you even buy right now? Let's say you absolutely need a new forward this week and you've already got Haaland. Who is better than Mateta? Voltemada? I mean, he's fine, but I don't think he's better than Mateta. He's not first choice penalty taker. His minutes aren't any better. The fixtures aren't any better either. So it's just and I completely get it. I feel like I've spoken about Mateta a lot this week. And sometimes I do get tunnel vision and I forget about other options. But genuinely, right now, who are the other options if people need a forward? I just don't think there really are any. Okay, Welbeck might be okay. But is he better than Mateta? Probably not. Thiago's fine if you need someone cheap, but is he better than Mateta? No, I don't think he is. Richarlison, definitely not. Ekitike will start this week if Isak's out, but long term, you're not sure about his minutes. You get the point, right? There's lots of alternatives, but how many of them are genuinely better than Mateta? Probably not that many. And also, by the way, yes, he scored a hat-trick. He hasn't scored many outside that, but his underlying numbers are so good. 0.71 expected goal per 90 is ridiculous. Now, he's not going to keep that up, but even before the hat-trick, he was running about 0.45, 0.5. That's very good. And Nketiah injury, that means Mateta's minutes are even better. So, is it a huge knee-jerk? In some ways, it kind of is because of the hat-trick, but I don't think people are making a mistake. I really don't. And on the first question about is he essential, no, despite what I've just said. Can you get by? If it makes sense for your team to not buy Mateta, that's absolutely fine. Like, he's absolutely not essential. I just know now, like personally for my team, now I've done Evan Nilsson to Mateta, he will probably just stay in up until game week 15, 16. I'll decide what to do based on what happens with the Carabao Cup match and stuff like that. And that's it. I just don't worry about him because if he plays badly and doesn't score from open play, he's got penalties. The minutes are there, the fixtures are there. He's just a really good pick. And I said at the start of the week this would happen. There'd be so much chat. People would get to the point where they're like, okay, but is he actually that good? It's the same thing with João Pedro at the start of the season. Sorry to use that as an example again, but it got to the point where his ownership was so high. I'm like, is he that good? And I came to the conclusion he wasn't. In this case, I think he just is. But I cannot think of a better alternative apart from Haaland. Like, even Gyökeres, if you were thinking about buying him, I'm not even sure I'd do that ahead of Mateta because despite having Burnley away, I think a lot of people that own Gyökeres are thinking about getting rid of him soon. So he's just a good pick. It just happens to coincide that everybody wants him this week. So is Gabriel a genuine captain option? I've seen a few people start to think about this. Here's my short answer. Yes, he's an option, but is he ever the best option in any given game week? I would suspect probably not. So I don't see me ever captaining Gabriel. The longer answer is this. He scored really well recently. 9, 12, 9, 13. And if you captain him for all of those games, you'd be feeling pretty happy right now. You'd probably be considering it again for game week 10 against Burnley away. But in my experience of playing FPL, I think deep down, people don't really want to captain defenders. They think about it at various times throughout a season, especially when said defender has done really well. But they don't really want to do it, despite knowing how good the Arsenal defence is. And it is amazing, best in the league by far. There's still that worry in the back of your mind. What if he loses the clean sheet? Now, the rebuttal to that is he can still get me defensive contributions. He can still get attacking returns. Yes, but once they lose that clean sheet, it's not quite so good for captaincy. So you really need that. And Arsenal can do that in most games. So that's why he's an option. But is he ever the best? I don't think so. Like, for one reason, any game where Gabriel is a genuine option, I think Saka is almost always going to be slightly better. Like this week, let's say Haaland wasn't an option. And by the way, I think Haaland is better than Gabriel this week. Let's say Haaland was injured or something like that. Gabriel, Saka, which do I prefer? I would go Saka. And I think that's the case in pretty much any single game week. Let's say the double happens in game week 16. It's super unlikely, by the way, but let's say it does. Wolves at home, Everton away for Arsenal. Maybe that week, if Madueke is back fit, maybe you can make a case that Gabriel is better than Saka because you know he's more likely to play both games for good minutes, whereas Saka could get subbed early in one or both games, etc. Maybe then it's Gabriel. But most of the games, Spurs at home in game week 12, rather go Saka. Game week 13, Chelsea away, prefer Saka. Game week 14, Brentford at home, I'd rather go Saka. So for me, Gabriel is extremely good. I've been singing his praises for a very long time in FPL, but captain, I'm not sure I'm quite there yet, and I don't think I ever will be. And I think deep down, most people don't want to do it. And some of that is just psychological around the clean sheet. My actual advice would be, if you're genuinely considering this, just do it right now, this week. Because if you're not going to do it against Burnley away, when are you going to do it? You know? And what usually happens, we've seen this with Trent in the past as well. People talk about it when they do really well. They put it off for weeks, and they're like, I wish I'd just done it. Then they do it, they lose the clean sheet, and they never do it again. So if you're going to do it, just do it right now against Burnley away. But I suspect for most of you that probably have Haaland as well, deep down you know he's probably the better option on paper, and that's where you're going to go. So is he a genuine captain option? You can think about him, therefore he is an option. I highly doubt he's ever going to be the best one, though. So how good is Minteh? Is he a solid long-term pick? So how good is he? Pretty good. Is he a solid long-term pick? Yes. He started every game. He's averaged 85 minutes per start. He's not going to African Cup of Nations. The next 6 fixtures are Leeds at home, Palace away, Brentford at home, Forest away, Villa at home, West Ham at home. So he's good for the next 6. And then after that West Ham game in game week 15, okay, Liverpool away, not great, but then it's Sunderland at home. Arsenal away, not great, but then it's West Ham away, Burnley at home. So basically, from now until game week 20, the 2 toughest games are Liverpool and Arsenal away in 16 and 18. And potentially, depending on how your squad is set up, you could bench him at that price. And also, by game week 16, you're going to have 5 free transfers anyway. Like, we're all going to get topped up to 5 free transfers in game week 16. So if you wanted to get rid of him, you could. I honestly think 6 million or below, I don't think there's any debate. I think Minteh is the best pick. I can't really think of anyone below. Like, it's not to say that everyone below that price is terrible, because that's not the case. Right? I know a lot of people have got Xhaka because he's cheap, etc. But 6 million or below, if you've got that much to spend, he is the one. I'm considering him this week. If I don't go this week, I'll consider him again in game week 12. He may well come into my team at some point. Like, he's not essential. You don't have to go out and get him. But if that's the kind of money you're spending, I think he's a good pick. Like, could Brighton mix it up at some point and take him out of the team? Potentially, but who for? Like, he's first choice right wing. When Mitoma's out, he's playing left wing as well. When Mitoma's back, he'll just move back to the right. They don't really have too many options for that spot. And the underlying numbers are pretty good. Now, he's a young player. We don't really know quite how good he can be, but there's definitely potential there, and the price is good. Like, if it's a choice between Sarr and Minteh this week, then I'd definitely pick Sarr from Crystal Palace. There's not really much competition there. The 6 million or under, that's who I would go for. So what should we do with Phil Foden? This is a guy that hasn't scored since game week 4. Obviously, a lot of people picked him up in game week 6 when Man City had Burnley at home. Nothing since. No goals, no assists. I will say this. I think you've been extremely unlucky. Like, I remember saying back before game week 6 that I would prefer Mbeumo because of long-term minutes. And I still stand by that, by the way. But actually, Foden's minutes have been great. So I got the call on that completely wrong. He's played 90 minutes every single game since game week 6. So to come away with no attacking returns is extremely harsh. What should you do with him going forward? I'm pretty sure he's going to start in game week 10. So if you've got other things to deal with, or you'd prefer to roll a transfer, he's absolutely worth keeping. Bournemouth at home is not a bad fixture. But I do think soon you're probably going to have to move him on. Like, I know Liverpool at home right now looks like a really easy fixture, and maybe it will end up being that. But if Liverpool can figure it out over the next week or two, or the next week, I should say, because it's next weekend, you know, it's on paper, it's not an amazing fixture. Then you've got Newcastle away in 12. And okay, the games get really good game week 13 onwards. But by that point, you've got other players coming back as well. Like, Cherky's going to be pushing for a place in that team. I think they've got to get Marmoush in at some point. Because in that Man City team right now, apart from Haaland, no one else is scoring. And Marmoush is a goal scorer. So I think they'll have to get him in. Cherky's pushing for a place as well. They're getting more players back fit, and that only spells disaster for all of their minutes moving forward. So I think it's okay to keep Foden for game week 10 if it makes sense for your team. But when you've got the transfers to deal with him, that is what I would do. So if you're sat there with like 2, 3, 4 transfers this week, and you could do Foden to Sarr and upgrade another spot or something like that, I would do it. Because I don't think he's great for 11. I don't think he's great for 12. And then 13 onwards, he could be amazing if the minutes are good. But whoever really wants to bet on that. So he's okay to keep one more week. I'm pretty sure he will start. Although I will never guarantee that for a Man City player, but I think he will. But after that, I think you've got to get rid. So what's your take on your own players playing against each other? Do you try and avoid it or just pick the stronger option? I've got Mukiele, Keane and Njai this week. When is it worth a transfer? And obviously Sunderland are playing home to Everton in game week 10. Look, ideally you avoid it, but it's almost impossible to do that over the course of a season. And if you try to do it, it'd probably give you a massive headache. Imagine having to think about bringing a player in, wondering, one, whether they're a good pick because of the fixtures, but then two, whether or not you might bring in a defender from one of those teams they're facing in like 4 or 5 game weeks' time. That's just headache inducing. You're never going to do that. So I wouldn't like massively worry about. Obviously, if you're looking to bring in, like, let's say you were looking to bring in a midfielder this week and you knew you were playing Mukiele, that might put you off buying Njai. But when they're already in your team, I think you've got to give it less like concern, basically. Like, when is it worth a transfer? Only when you're making a massive upgrade that you want to keep long term. Like, I wouldn't sell Njai specifically because he's playing Mukiele. I wouldn't sell Mukiele specifically because he's playing Njai. If you want them long term, you should hold them. Also, I think this has slightly less impact this season because of defensive contributions. Like, there are obviously scenarios where this can work out for you, where those three players combined get decent points. And it might require one of them to blank, but players don't get points every week anyway. So what I mean by that is, let's say it's 0-0. That's perfect. Njai gets 3 points, Keane gets 6, Mukiele gets 6, and maybe 1, 2, or all 3 of them get defensive contributions. Like, that's a scenario that could work really nice for you. Let's say Everton win 1-0, and it's an Njai penalty. Keane gets his clean sheet. Mukiele concedes. Maybe he finishes on 2 points. Maybe he finishes on 4 because he picks up defensive contributions. There are lots of scenarios where it can work out. Obviously, it could be terrible, right? It could be 1-1 and none of the players you own score. But it's not such a big deal that I would worry about it. It's like people with Crystal Palace defenders and Thiago this week. In most cases, it's probably going to be worth it for their team just to play both. Thiago could score, Munoz could score. Thiago could score, Lacroix could get defensive contributions. It's just not as big a worry as maybe it was in previous seasons. And the only reason I would use a transfer to deal with it is if the player you're playing is bad and you can make a massive upgrade that's good for your team in the future. Let me give you some final thoughts on my own team going into tomorrow's deadline. So ever since I put out that team selection video yesterday, I've had lots of ideas thrown at me as to what moves I should make with my 2 free transfers. So as a reminder, I've already used 1 transfer to do Evan Nilsson to Mateta. I've got 2 left and 0.1 million in the bank. So some of the ideas, for example, Semenyo to Sarr, Reinders to Minteh. Not that I really want to sell Semenyo, but I get it. Van Dijk down to Keane or someone around the 4.5 million price, and then Reinders up to Sarr, which again, I don't hate because Keane's next 2 fixtures, Sunderland away, Fulham at home, not bad. He's got good goal threat and it takes some money out of my defence. And I've been thinking on Friday, like morning, Friday afternoon, am I just being too passive here? We're going to get 5 transfers in game week 16. There's probably not much I need to do over game weeks 12 to 14. I could just use the moves now. And I was maybe slightly edging towards using them, although I still think I would have rolled. But then we got the Fulham press conference. And all of a sudden, there is a genuine chance that Joachim Andersen might start. And sometimes in FPL, it's just a little thing like that that changes your mind. And all of a sudden, if we think Andersen starts, which I think there's a good chance of, I can play back 4. And now all of a sudden, I've only got to play 1 of Reinders, Paquetá, Dewsbury Hall. And suddenly, I think the 11 looks a bit better. Do I wish I had Munoz? Do I wish I had Sarr, Saka, etc.? Of course. But that's not a terrible, terrible team. I mean, by the way, I could play back 4 and do Van Dijk to Keane, Reinders to Sarr. That would still be quite nice. But I think I'm basically using 2 moves just to upgrade Reinders. Like, Van Dijk's okay this week. He's not amazing. You probably shouldn't be buying him. But he's not awful. And I think when I end up going down to 0 transfers, I really want to be sure about my moves. And I understand people hate that I always roll. Not that I do always roll, by the way, but there's a perception that's all I ever do. And that maybe I'm being too passive and my team's not perfect, which of course it's not. But rolling is never terrible. I'm going to be able to use those moves eventually. And maybe I'll find an even better move to make. I just want to be sure, and I'm not sure. And therefore, if you're not sure, rolling is probably best. Like with Van Dijk, I completely get it. Absolutely awful value. But I have to keep reminding myself how good the fixtures are, 12 to 19. I've come this far with him. It's Villa at home this week. Is now the time to sell him. Like, honestly, 12 to 19, the only bad fixture really is probably Spurs away. Every other fixture is great. Look, I won't even say great because I know people, Sunderland, like best team in the league, etc. But they're very, very good fixtures from 12 to 19 apart from Spurs away. So I don't want to sell him unless I'm absolutely sure, and I'm not sure. And by the way, I think Reinders starts this week. If he gets 70, 75 minutes, could that be enough for a return against Bournemouth? Hopefully. And if he doesn't, I think the rest of my 10 players are fine. Raya in goal, Van Dijk, Gabriel, Lacroix, Andersen back 4, Fernandes, Semenyo in midfield, Mateta, Haaland, Yorkresh up front. So that's just the difference, I think, with how I'm thinking about my team versus how someone who's watching this is thinking about my team. Like, all they can see is Reinders is a problem, Reinders is a problem. You've got 2 transfers, get rid of him. I look at it and say, next week I'm going to have 3, which is a really strong position, and 10 of my players this week are absolutely fine. And there's always something later on that might come up anyway where I need those moves. So I think Anderson's changed the game a little bit. There might be embargoed press quotes that come out tonight, and maybe they dampen my enthusiasm around Anderson, and maybe I go back to thinking about using 2 transfers. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to roll. I think I'm going to. By the way, would you play Reinders or Paquetá? Paquetá's on penalties and probably going to be 90 minutes. Reinders not necessarily. I might switch them around. But otherwise, I'm happy. I'm going to roll Haaland captain, 3 moves next week. And next week, I might use all 3 transfers, or I might actually just roll to 4 after the break. We'll see what happens. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that video and found it useful, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll be back tomorrow for the deadline stream. Reminder, by the way, it's a 1:30 p.m. UK time deadline. So the deadline stream will start at 11:30 instead of the usual 9 a.m. slot. I'll see you then.